40, because it's time to talk about Brandon Aiyuk and whether or not you are tired of the Brandon Aiyuk saga. Do you just want it to be done with? Do you even still want him on the team? I know that sounds crazy.
Yes, I'll answer that one. Yes.
Well, that's your opinion, Kyle. Let's see what other people think as well. So this is, and we have the full timeline that we'll get into, and we're going to be joined by Jason Aponte at 8 o'clock to really dive deep into this thing. I keep rechecking my social media to see if something is going to break. I know it's a little early on the West Coast, but that has not stopped Adam Schefter and the 4-Letter Network from releasing more articles about the situation. This is Matt Maiocco, though, and yesterday he reported that there were multiple teams, and then a couple teams dropped out. First, it was the Steelers. Then after that, it was the Browns and the Patriots, okay, and just multiple teams. So this is what came out yesterday. And you have really a piece that Matt Maiocco put out, and you had something that said you could get the Patriots 2, then and Kendrick Bourne, all right, or you could get Amari Cooper from the Browns and the Browns second rounder. And the two biggest things there, Kyle, is that Amari Cooper is better than Kendrick Bourne. But you would assume that the Patriots pick is going to be better than the Browns pick. So that's what everybody is hung up on, trying to figure out where this thing is going to go. And Brandon Aiyuk is trying to figure out what exactly it is that he wants. That was earlier in the day when that got reported. But it's just been a complete mess. Matthew Berry, I've heard that the rumors about Aiyuk wanting to go to Pitt and SF open to dealing with them are true, actually. Not a done deal, but it's actually not as random a rumor as you might think. That was at 4:14. Then later in the night, that's when Matt Maiocco came out and said that basically the Steelers were leaving the chat. Okay, the Commanders were leaving the chat, and it's between the Patriots and the Browns. But Brandon Aiyuk has the control, and Brandon Aiyuk can say whether or not he wants to go to either of those teams or stay and play on the last year of his deal. And they're both being petty for different reasons, Kyle. Every time a different report comes out, has there ever been another situation where people have question marks for both parties, right? People are mad at the Niners for letting it get this far. And I should say fans. Some fans are mad at the Niners for letting it get this far. Some fans are mad at Brandon Aiyuk for just doing this in general. And it's one of those things where I feel like when it was the Debo situation, it was similar, but at the same time, I don't know how many people were actually upset with the Niners. I think it was, hey, this is what teams do, or this is what players do, and Debo is going to do his thing and scrub social media, and they're going to figure it was very much cookie cutter.
Yeah.
This one is not cookie cutter.
So with the Niners, I agree with you in the case of I can't think of a scenario with this Niners regime where there's been a contract negotiation quite like this. Because even when it was Nick Bosa, it was always, we're going to get a deal done. And Nick Bosa was like, we're going to get a deal done. It just, there was a mutually agreeable circumstance there. In terms of the league at large, this isn't as uncommon, I think, as we're making it out to be. Like, I'm old enough to remember the Lamar Jackson saga of last summer, or last spring, where everyone was like, Baltimore, what are you doing? And everyone was like, Lamar Jackson, what are you doing? So I guess it's not that uncommon because of how the NFL structures are set up with the franchise tag and everything, and it takes a lot of the leverage away from the player, so the player kind of has to make a public stink or leak out information to try and create leverage. But I'm very surprised about everything that happened yesterday, to your point, because it does sound like both people are being petty because the mutually beneficial outcome is for the Niners to just extend Brandon Aiyuk. I don't understand why it's now gotten to a place where there might be a trade, there might not be a trade, or why the Niners want to get another player in return for a Brandon Aiyuk trade, because what they should have done was just make the trade back at the draft and pick your guy so that you have a cost-controlled rookie contract.
But that's Ricky
receiver.
Pearsall.
Yeah, but they could have. Do you think they could have gotten a first-round pick for Brandon Aiyuk
at that time?
At that time,
yes.
So then they have 2 first-round picks, and you get Pearsall and you get whoever else. I don't understand how it's gotten to this point, and if the holdup is the contract, or I'm sorry, if the holdup is the trade negotiations about a second or a first, they'll probably do that thing that teams have done in recent years where it's like, if you play 75% of the snaps, we'll make it a first if you're the Browns or something like that. And if it's the Patriots, you'll just take the second round pick because it's probably going to be borderline a first round pick anyways.
Yeah. So then so all of that happened. And at 7:31, this is where Matt Mayoko drops the heater on 49ers on NBC Sports Bay Area. Breaking, the 49ers have the framework of a Brandon Aiyuk trade with both the Browns and the Patriots, a source told Matt Mayoko. Now, everybody's saying that source is the Niners. That source is the Niners because the Niners want it to be known. This is on Aiyuk. We have 2 packages. We're ready to move forward. Aiyuk's got to figure out what he wants. This is on Brandon. It says now it's up to, and this is 49ers on NBC Sports Bay Area. Now it's up to Aiyuk to decide if he will accept either team's contract terms. You go on to say, or he goes on to say in the article, the 49ers would likely acquire a veteran wide receiver and a package of draft picks from the Browns or the Patriots. Browns would be in a position to add Aiyuk if wide receiver Amari Cooper were sent to the 49ers as part of the trade. Mary Kay Cabot of Cleveland.com reported the Patriots are expected to include former Niners wide receiver Kendrick Bourne as part of a deal if Aiyuk were to accept New England's offer. If Aiyuk ultimately declines to agree to sign a multi-year contract with the Browns or Patriots, it remains a possibility that he could remain with the 49ers. However, Aiyuk and the Niners haven't engaged in contract talks for months. He remains tied to the 49ers on a rookie deal that is scheduled to pay him $14.1 million this season. So it seems like we can't come to an agreement. We can't come to a resolution. So here you go, Aiyuk. This is the situation that we can do for you. Let's not make this messy. Does either of this tickle your fancy? And if it doesn't, then let's move forward. Then get in the building, and then you can be a free agent. That's why I think, Kyle, and we were talking a little bit prior to the show, that's why I don't know if they will drag this thing out as in the Niners with the franchise tag. Because even though it was the DAP heard or seen around the world last week, this thing can get a little bit sticky. I think it's play, and Niners don't, I guess to your point, the Niners don't want to get nothing for him, but there's only so much leverage you can. I mean, you got to either pay him. Now they're saying, well, we want to trade him, or we can trade him, but he's got to agree to it. The Niners don't want to lose him for nothing, but at the same time, this season ends. Do you really want to franchise tag him and go through this all over again?
Well, you can always tag and trade him. That's the thing. They will not get nothing for him. The NFL is just set up so that Aiyuk simply cannot walk without having to negotiate a trade and go through the tag and trade. But is whatever they're going to get now so much substantially better that you're not willing to take maybe 70% of that offer later just to have one more run with Aiyuk?
It's a good point.
That's where I'm confused with this whole process. Is I thought after there wasn't a trade at the draft that they were just going to run it back with the same group next year. The fact that this came up yesterday is really strange. From the Niners perspective, not necessarily from the Aiyuk perspective, but from the Niners perspective, it's like, why are we now in the middle of training camp trying to stir the pot essentially at the last second? Unless this has been something that's been on the table for weeks and it's been Aiyuk's representatives negotiating with the Pittsburghs and New Englands of the world.
Yeah, it's starting to fester a little bit. And maybe this is a little bit of the Niners trying to, not that they didn't have any control, but just putting everything out on Front Street. Hey, Aiyuk, we know you're doing this holding thing, but it's very clear you don't know what you want, right? I mean, we have a lot of people have friends and family members that when we were growing up, oh, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a police officer. There's some people that just don't know what they want. And sometimes, whether you enter the military or whatever it is, they need someone to help them figure out what it is that they want. And maybe the Niners feel like we're going to help you, Brandon Aiyuk. You said you wanted to trade, and a lot of the whole thing was, oh, well, he requested a trade. He didn't demand a trade, which means that he doesn't necessarily want to leave, but if you find somebody. I've been going off on Aiyuk because it's this 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You had Mark Schlereth just destroy him last week, and it just gets to a point here, brother, where you got to figure out what exactly it is that you want. This isn't hopscotch. This isn't double dutch. You can't just hop in, hop out. Either stand on your word, right, and say, you know what, I'm done. This is what I deserve, and I'm not playing if I don't get it, or stop, or just let it go. So I think the Niners are saying enough is enough. We got to get ready. Kyle, they traded, and I know I'm going to trigger some people here, but they traded Trey Lance not because, and I know there's been some bad video. They didn't trade Trey Lance because he was terrible per se. They traded Trey Lance because they didn't want to have to talk about pitch counts and how many different, opportunities was he getting versus Brandon Allen and Sam Darnold. They didn't want to deal with that. And then it turns into, oh, well, Trey Lance was a distraction. But it wasn't Trey Lance. It was everything around him. Brandon Aiyuk is being a distraction. They went out and drafted his replacement. Now, it looks like Ricky Pearsall right now can't necessarily get the separation that they want. We'll talk to Jason Aponte about that. But they said, look, if this is what you're going to cause, we got dudes. There's wide receivers coming out every single season. And we like you, Aiyuk. But I got into it with one of my buddies who's a Seahawks fan yesterday saying, are we sure Aiyuk's better than DK? Are we sure DK in that offense wouldn't look like Brandon Aiyuk? So you can mess around and find out if you want Brandon Aiyuk. And this is what it is. And I think the Niners are just sick of it. And they're saying, hey, and I'm not saying they told Matt Maiocco straight up, but he is very connected to the team. And a source told me, and it's very detailed, this stuff that's coming out. Here's the framework. Here's who they'd probably get. Yeah. In theory, the Niners are sick of it. They're done with it. And in the NFL versus the NBA, they can afford to just say, Aiyuk, we're done. Right? This isn't James Harden in a fat suit and I know you have something, Kyle, when we get to our 3 for madness with Kyrie Irving. This isn't one of those situations. Is Brandon Aiyuk as good as James Harden? Even if it was, is Brandon Aiyuk as good as James Harden when he decided to leave the Rockets?
No.
Is Brandon Aiyuk as good as Kyrie Irving when he wanted out of Boston?
No.
So not only do you not have the same type of player empowerment as you do in the NBA, you're not as good as those guys. When everybody was worried about even the NBA and, people are just going to leave their contract, it's not an issue because those guys don't just fall off trees, okay? You're not going to find a Kyrie Irving every day or a Kevin Durant every day. That's why they have that leverage. And I think Aiyuk, and look, somebody is willing to pay him. But what Adam Schefter is also reporting, along with Mike Reese, is that this isn't just a one situation thing. You have the first situation, you need Brandon Aiyuk to say yes, and you need the Niners to say yes. That's two things that have to happen. That's why people are still saying this guy might just have to play. He's got to walk back with his tail between his legs and say, fine, I'll play and we'll figure it out, in the offseason, whatever the case may be. So Brandon Aiyuk, who's being pettier, you could really pick both sides, but I'm going to go with Brandon Aiyuk simply because you don't know what you want, clearly. You got to ask your significant other, hey, what do you want for dinner? Right? You know what I personally do, Kyle? I go by elimination. You know what I mean? I do process of elimination. Do you want pizza? No. Okay. Do you want a burger? No. Okay. Do you want Chinese? No. Okay. Then we just keep going down the list. Okay.
But I feel like we do. Brandon Aiyuk knows what he wants for dinner. It's a 4-year contract with $84 million guaranteed.
But does he? But now there are teams that want to pay him Now the word on the street
Allegedly.
is that allegedly that he didn't want to go to some of these teams. So I want my money and I want it now. Now I sound like one of those infomercials, but I don't want it on this team. I don't want it on that team. And we got to get to the other side when we get back. Continuing the Brandon Aiyuk conversation, that's at 7. We're going to have some fun with Safer Out, and Kyle's going to ask me a couple baseball questions. More Brandon Aiyuk at 7, and we will get to your calls, texts, in the chat.